August 17, 1943. Railway platform, Rosenberg, East Prussia. 10:15 hours. Generalleutnant Adolf Galland stood watching Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring board his luxury train. They had just finished conference about Luftwaffe fighter operations. Galland needed to deliver critical intelligence before Göring departed. Intelligence concerning American fighter aircraft appearing deep inside German airspace. Fighters that should not exist. Fighters that were killing German pilots who had been told such aircraft were impossible. Earlier that morning, Luftwaffe fighters intercepted massive American bomber raid targeting Regensburg and Schweinfurt. Engagement followed predictable patterns. German fighters waited at border. American escort fighters, Republic P-37 Thunderbolts, turned back as expected once fuel ran low. Bombers continued deeper into Germany without protection. Then something unprecedented happened. More American fighters appeared, not Thunderbolts, different aircraft. They engaged German fighters over 150 miles inside Germany, far beyond where any escort should have been able to reach. Galland had collected reports from squadron commanders across Reich. American fighters were Lockheed P-38 Lightnings equipped with external drop tanks. Drop tanks extended their range dramatically. This changed everything. Galland approached Göring at railway platform, presented his findings directly. American fighters with extended range penetrating deep into Germany. Squadron commanders reported P-38 Lightnings equipped with drop tanks engaging over Schweinfurt, over Regensburg, over targets that should have been beyond escort range. Tactical doctrine of waiting for escorts to turn back was no longer viable. Göring listened. His face reddened. His voice rose. He declared that American fighters had not reached that far into Germany. Reports were wrong. Fighters Galland described must have been damaged aircraft that glided eastward from great altitude after being hit over France or Belgium. They were flukes, anomalies, not evidence of extended range capability. Galland protested. He explained drop tank system. Multiple squadrons reported same encounters on same day. These were not damaged aircraft gliding. These were fighters in full combat capability, engaging German aircraft deep inside Reich. Göring cut him off. Reichsmarschall stated it was physically impossible for American fighters to reach that far inland. He gave Galland direct order. He officially asserted that American fighters had not crossed into central Germany. This was an order. Galland understood immediately. Göring was denying reality. Reichsmarschall refused to accept intelligence that contradicted his assumptions. Galland replied with what witnesses later described as unforgettable smile. "Orders are orders, sir." Train departed. Galland watched it leave. He knew Luftwaffe had just lost its opportunity to prepare for a threat that would destroy it. What happened next would doom thousands of German pilots who would die fighting enemy they were told did not exist. This confrontation on railway platform would echo through history. Single moment when German Air Force could have adapted. Single chance to prepare for a threat that would annihilate them. Single opportunity that vanished because leader refused to accept uncomfortable truth. And thousands would die because of it. To understand why Göring's denial was catastrophic, you need to understand what American bomber doctrine demanded in August 1943. 8th Air Force flying daylight precision bombing raids deep into Germany, target ball-bearing factories at Schweinfurt, aircraft plants at Regensburg, synthetic oil refineries, industrial infrastructure keeping German war machine operate. Problem was range. American heavy bombers, B-17 Flying Fortresses and B-24 Liberators, could reach targets deep in Germany. But escort fighters could not. P-47 Thunderbolt was primary escort fighter in August 1943. Powerful aircraft. Well armed, good performance. But combat radius of only 175 miles with internal fuel meant escorts could only cover bombers to German border, maybe slightly beyond. Then had to turn back or run out of fuel. German fighter doctrine exploited this ruthlessly. Let escorts reach maximum range, wait for them to turn back, then attack bombers when defenseless. It worked brutally well. On August 17, 1943, 8th Air Force launched twin raids against Regensburg and Schweinfurt. 376 B-17s. Most ambitious deep penetration mission attempted to date. American planners knew bombers would be unescorted over target, accepted heavy casualties as necessary cost. Intelligence estimated 30–40% losses, 120–150 bombers destroyed. German fighter commanders prepared for massacre. Luftwaffe had perfected tactics for killing unescorted bombers. Head-on attacks killed pilots. Attacks from below exploited weak defensive fire. Coordinated assaults overwhelmed gunners. Major Egon Mayer of Jagdgeschwader II had personally shot down 102 Allied bombers using these tactics. His squadron destroyed over 200 bombers between January and August 1943. This mission should have been their greatest victory. But P-38 Lightnings changed equation. P-38 was twin-engine fighter designed by Lockheed. Distinctive twin-boom configuration, powerful armament, good high-altitude performance, and with external drop tanks, combat radius of 585 miles, more than triple P-47's range. American planners had equipped several P-38 groups with 150-gallon drop tanks, allowed them to escort bombers deep into Germany, stay with formations over target, engage German fighters far beyond where escorts had ever appeared before. German fighter pilots were not prepared for this. Their entire tactical doctrine assumed escorts would turn back at predictable points. They planned attacks accordingly, waited for safe zones where bombers had no protection. Now those safe zones did not exist. German fighters attacked bomber formations as planned. Then P-38s dove from altitude, engaged German fighters over targets that should have been beyond escort range. Luftwaffe squadrons scattered. Kill ratios dropped. German losses mounted. On August 17th alone, Luftwaffe lost approximately 25–27 fighters during Regensburg-Schweinfurt raids. Many fell to long-range P-38 escorts that doctrine said were impossible. American losses were still severe. 60 bombers destroyed, 600 aircrew killed or captured. But critical fact was this: American bombers penetrated deep into Germany with continuous fighter escort throughout entire mission. Tactical assumption that escorts would turn back at predictable points had been shattered. German fighter commanders now had to assume American escorts could appear anywhere at any time, far deeper into Germany than doctrine suggested was possible. This was intelligence Galland tried to present to Göring. This was reality Reichsmarschall refused to accept. And this refusal would cost thousands of German lives. Adolf Galland was not typical Nazi officer. Born March 19, 1912 in Westerholt, Westphalia. Father was a state manager. Mother came from French Huguenot family. Galland grew up surrounded by aviation. He learned to fly gliders at 17, joined Lufthansa as commercial pilot at 20. When Germany began secretly rebuilding Air Force in violation of Versailles Treaty, Galland was recruited. He flew combat missions during Spanish Civil War with Condor Legion, 300 ground attack missions, developed expertise in close air support tactics, never scored air-to-air kill in Spain, but learned invaluable lessons about combat flying. When World War II began, Galland was 27. He flew Messerschmitt Bf 109 fighters during Battle of France, scored his first kills, demonstrated natural talent for air combat. By August 1940, during Battle of Britain, Galland commanded 3 JG-26. He shot down 57 aircraft in 4 months, became one of Germany's top aces, received Knight's Cross with oak leaves. WWII. November 1941. At age 29, Galland was promoted to Geschwader Commodore of JG-26, youngest officer to command fighter wing. Led from front, flew combat missions while handling administrative duties. He understood fighter operations at tactical level better than any Luftwaffe general. He knew what pilots faced. He knew what aircraft could do. He knew limitations of equipment and training. This made him perfect choice for General der Jagdflieger, General of Fighter Pilots, position he assumed November 1941. But it also created problem. Galland saw reality. He reported facts. He recommended solutions based on operational experience. And increasingly, German leadership did not want to hear facts that contradicted their assumptions. Göring particularly could not accept intelligence suggesting German air superiority was threatened. Reichsmarschall had promised Hitler that Luftwaffe would destroy any threat. Any report suggesting otherwise was dismissed as defeatism or incompetence. When Galland presented evidence of long-range American fighters on August 17, 1943, he was not guessing. He had reports from multiple squadron commanders, combat after-action reports, intelligence from captured American airmen, wreckage of P-38 drop tanks recovered from combat zones WWII. Evidence was overwhelming. Undeniable. Göring denied it anyway, called it impossible, gave order that no such threat existed. Galland understood implications immediately. If leadership refused to acknowledge threat, Luftwaffe could not prepare for it, could not develop countermeasures, could not adapt tactics, could not allocate resources to address problem. They would continue fighting as if escorts could not reach deep into Germany, and German pilots would die when escorts appeared exactly where doctrine said they could not be. Losses began immediately. 3 weeks after railway platform confrontation, September 6, 1943, another disastrous engagement proved Galland's warnings correct. Formation of American B-17 bombers struck Stuttgart with P-38 escorts, reaching deep into southern Germany. Major Egon Mayer of JG-2 led interception. Mayer was one of Germany's most successful bomber-destroyers with 57 kills. Mayer's squadron attacked from ahead of bomber formation as planned. They scored hits on several bombers, then P-38 escorts dove from altitude. Escorts had been positioned above and behind bomber stream, waiting for exactly this moment. Mayer's formation scattered. 3 German fighters shot down in first pass. Mayer himself barely escaped when P-38 got on his tail. He pushed his Bf-109 into steep dive and outran heavier American fighter. But 5 of his squadron did not return. 3 pilots killed. 2 captured after bailing out. 0 bombers confirmed destroyed. Mission was complete failure. By October 1943, pattern was unmistakable. American bombers striking deep into Germany with fighter escorts that Göring had declared impossible. Luftwaffe continued fighting using tactics based on assumptions that were demonstrably false. Pilots were told escorts could not reach certain targets. They planned attacks accordingly. Then escorts appeared and shot them down. October 14, 1943, Black Thursday. Another Schweinfurt raid resulted in catastrophic losses for both sides. Americans lost 60 bombers. Luftwaffe lost 38 fighters, with pilots killed or wounded. December 4, 1943, Hauptmann Wilhelm Lemke of JG-3 was killed near Dullens in Netherlands. Lemke had 131 kills and was one of Germany's most successful aces. He was shot down during combat with P-47 Thunderbolts of 352nd Fighter Group. He was 23 years old. Loss of experienced aces like Lemke represented irreplaceable depletion of Luftwaffe's combat effectiveness. Black Thursday raid demonstrated both strength and weakness of American bombing strategy. 60 bombers lost in single day represented 9% of attacking force. 600 aircrew killed or captured. Such losses were unsustainable. 8th Air Force suspended deep penetration raids for several weeks after Black Thursday to rebuild strength and await arrival of more long-range escorts. But for Luftwaffe, raid represented something equally ominous. Despite achieving highest bomber kill count of war, German fighter losses were approaching parity with bomber kills. Luftwaffe destroyed 60 bombers but lost 38 fighters and 42 pilots in process. Before advent of long-range escorts, exchange rate had been 3 or 4 bombers destroyed for every fighter lost. Now it was approaching 1 to 1. That was unsustainable for Germany. Americans could replace losses. Germany could not. By early 1944, situation Galland had warned about in August 1943 had become catastrophic reality. January 1944, P-51 Mustang arrived in significant numbers. even longer range than P-38, better performance at altitude, superior maneuverability, could escort bombers to Berlin and back. Combined with P-38s and P-47s with improved drop tanks, Americans now had complete air superiority over Germany. No target was beyond escort range. No mission was unprotected. German fighter pilots faced impossible situation. They had to engage bomber formations defended by fighters that outnumbered them, that could follow them home to their bases, that could loiter over combat zones for hours. Losses mounted. 500 German pilots killed in January 1944, 600 in February, 700 in March. These were not replaceable losses. These were experienced combat pilots with hundreds of hours of training and multiple combat tours. Germany's pilot training program could not produce replacements at anywhere near this rate. Fuel shortages made training even harder. New pilots arrived at frontline units with 50-60 hours flight time. Veterans had 400-500 hours before their first combat. New pilots lasted days, sometimes hours. Galland repeatedly requested resources to address crisis, more aircraft production, better pilot training, tactical adaptations, development of new aircraft like Me-262 jet fighter. Every request was denied or delayed. German industrial capacity was stretched. Resources were needed for Eastern Front, for U-boat construction, for V-weapon production. Fighter defense was not priority. Göring continued blaming fighter pilots for losses. He accused them of cowardice, of refusing to close with enemy, of fabricating reports about overwhelming American numbers. In January 1945, Galland was finally relieved as General der Jagdflieger. Göring blamed him for failing to stop Allied air offensive. Galland was forbidden from flying combat missions. He ignored order, formed JV-44, elite squadron flying Me-262 jet fighters, handpicked Germany's best surviving aces. Galland flew combat missions himself despite being 33 years old and technically grounded. April 26, 1945, Galland was shot down by P-47 Thunderbolt near Munich. Pilot was Lieutenant James Finnegan of 479th Fighter Group. Galland nursed damaged Me-262 back to German lines, survived with minor injuries. 8 days later, Germany surrendered. Galland's combat record, over 700 missions, 104 aerial victories, wounded 4 times, survived war. But his real legacy was not kills, was not medals, was warning he tried to deliver on railway platform in August 1943. Warning that was ignored, warning that if heeded might have changed outcome of air war. In 1979, 34 years after war, Galland met James Finnegan at Air Force Association meeting in San Francisco. Graduate student had matched Finnegan's combat report with German records and arranged meeting. Two men talked for hours about engagement. Finnegan described seeing Me-262 making attack run on bombers and positioning his P-47 for shot. Galland described feeling hits and struggling to keep damaged jet flying long enough to reach friendly territory. They discussed aircraft, tactics, experience of combat. There was mutual respect between them. They had both been professional military pilots doing their duty in terrible war. Meeting was filmed and became important historical document. One of rare occasions where pilot and man who shot him down met decades later to discuss engagement in detail. Adolf Galland survived war, was captured by Allied forces, spent time as prisoner until 1947. After release, worked as military advisor to Argentine Air Force for 6 years. Returned to Germany in 1955 and worked as aerospace consultant. He published autobiography, The First and the Last, in 1954. Book detailed his experiences as General der Jagdflieger and conflicts with Göring and Hitler over air strategy. Became one of most important primary sources on Luftwaffe operations. Galland lived until 1996. He died at age 83. In interviews throughout his life, historians ask Galland about turning point of air war. When did he know Germany would lose? Galland consistently pointed to August 1943. Moment he tried to warn Göring about long-range American fighters penetrating deep into Germany. He knew then that Luftwaffe faced threat it could not overcome if leadership refused to adapt. He had presented evidence. He had recommended immediate action, and Göring had given him order that no such threat existed. That decision, Galland argued in later years, cost Germany any chance of maintaining air superiority. If Luftwaffe had adapted in August 1943, when P-38s with drop tanks first appeared, perhaps different outcomes were possible. Perhaps more resources allocated to jet fighter production before too late. Perhaps training programs expanded before fuel shortages made it impossible. Perhaps tactics developed to counter numerical superiority of Allied fighters before pilot corps was decimated. But Göring refused to acknowledge threat. He called it impossible. He ordered Galland to stop reporting such intelligence. By time crisis became undeniable, it was far too late. Luftwaffe fighter force had been shattered, thousands of pilots killed, most experienced leaders dead, training pipeline collapsed. Germany lost air superiority over its own territory and never regained it. Strategic bombing campaign continued unopposed through 1945. German cities burned, factories destroyed, transportation networks collapsed. Oil production fell to levels that grounded entire air units. War became unwinnable not because Germany lacked courage or skill, but because it lost control of its own airspace. And it traced back to August 1943, when General tried to warn his commander about threat that was dismissed with order denying reality. Today, 79 years later, military historians study Galland-Göring railway platform confrontation as textbook example of command failure. Not through dramatic betrayal or obvious incompetence, but through refusal to accept uncomfortable intelligence, through dismissing evidence that contradicts existing assumptions, through punishing subordinates who report problems instead of addressing problems themselves, through giving orders that deny reality rather than adapting to changed circumstances. United States Air Force teaches case study at Squadron Officer School. Required reading for all officers. Lesson is clear. Leaders must accept uncomfortable truths, must adapt to changing threats, must listen to subordinates with operational expertise. Failure to do so costs lives. Modern air forces emphasize intelligence gathering and threat assessment, real-time reporting from combat zones, immediate analysis, rapid tactical adaptation, systems designed to prevent exactly type of failure Göring demonstrated. NATO air doctrine includes specific provisions for reporting unexpected enemy capabilities, requirements for immediate dissemination, protocols for rapid response, all lessons learned from Luftwaffe's failure. German Bundeswehr, modern German military, studies Galland's warnings as example of proper military professionalism. Officer who reported facts regardless of political consequences, who maintained integrity despite pressure from superiors, who tried to save lives even when leadership would not listen. Galland is honored in Germany today not as Nazi, but as professional soldier who tried to tell truth in system that punished truth-telling. His warnings about P-38s were correct. His recommendations were sound. His analysis was accurate. He was ignored, and thousands died as a result. United States Air Force Museum at Wright-Patterson has display about Schweinfurt raids, includes captured Luftwaffe documents, combat reports from both sides, analysis of tactical evolution. Centerpiece is reproduction of Galland's August 1943 intelligence report warning about long-range American fighters. Next to it is Göring's dismissive response. Visitors can see exactly how command failure manifests, how denial of reality leads to catastrophe, how refusing to adapt ensures defeat. Placard explains, General Galland attempted to warn Reichsmarschall Göring about extended-range American escort fighters. Göring declared such aircraft impossible and ordered Galland to stop making such reports. Within 6 months, Luftwaffe fighter force was decimated by exactly the threat Galland had identified. Simple, direct, devastating. Russian Air Force also studies case. During Chechen wars, Russian commanders initially dismissed reports about Chechen anti-aircraft capabilities. Result was catastrophic losses of Russian aircraft in first weeks of conflict. After-action analysis specifically referenced Göring-Galland example. Russian military doctrine was revised to emphasize accepting field reports about unexpected threats. Israeli Air Force teaches case to all fighter pilots. Emphasis on reporting what you see, not what doctrine says you should see. Culture of bottom-up intelligence reporting. Assumption that enemy will adapt and surprise you. These lessons trace directly to Galland's failed warning in 1943. Legacy of railway platform confrontation extends far beyond World War II. It shaped how modern militaries think about intelligence, adaptation, and command responsibility. It proved that denying reality does not change reality, only ensures you will be unprepared when reality arrives. Göring called long-range American fighters impossible. They destroyed Luftwaffe anyway. His denial did not make them disappear, only made Germany vulnerable to threat that could have been countered if acknowledged in time. Galland tried to warn him, presented facts, recommended solutions, was ignored. That is tragedy of August 17, 1943. Not that threat existed, but that Germany had chance to prepare and leadership refused to take it. Single moment on railway platform, single conversation, single order denying reality. And thousands of German pilots died fighting enemy they were told did not exist until far too late. That is power of leadership failure. That is cost of denying uncomfortable truths. That is lesson we must remember. Because Göring was not stupid, was not ignorant, was not incompetent. He was intelligent, experienced military commander who refused to accept intelligence that contradicted his assumptions. That can happen to anyone. That can happen in any organization. That can happen in any conflict. Only solution is culture that values truth over comfort, evidence over assumption, reality over politics. Galland tried to create that culture. He failed, not through lack of effort, through lack of power to force leadership to listen. His warning echoes still, 79 years later. Reminder that wars are lost, not just on battlefield, but in headquarters where leaders refuse to accept what subordinates are trying to tell them.